So, let's talk about something we've all been feeling in our wallets. After the pandemic, something really weird happened to the economy. Prices for, well, everything, from gas to groceries, they just started climbing, and they didn't really stop. Policymakers seemed just as confused as the rest of us. So, what on earth happened? Why did everything get so expensive so fast? Let's dig in and try to solve this mystery. Remember back in 2021, the message we kept hearing from the top was, don't worry, it's temporary. The head of the US Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, famously called it transitory. The idea was that these were just little supply chain hiccups from the pandemic. Once things got sorted out, prices would just fall back into line. Yeah, well, that's not at all what happened. And this is where the plot really thickens. Just look at this chart. Inflation, that's the red line, it didn't drop back. It shot sky high. And what's wild is how closely it follows that blue line, the massive spike in energy prices. It was almost a perfect mirror. This wasn't a hiccup, this was a shockwave. And here's the real head scratcher. For the last 30 years or so, we've had big swings in energy prices before, but inflation pretty much stayed in its lane, low and stable. So what changed? Why did this particular energy shock set off this huge inflationary spiral when all the previous ones didn't? That right there is the central question we need to answer. All right, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to understand how our global economy was actually wired before the pandemic. And it all comes down to something you could call the just-in-time gamble. For decades, the gold standard in business, the smartest way to do things, was this strategy called just-in-time. The concept is pretty clever, actually. Instead of having these huge, expensive warehouses filled with parts collecting dust, you get just enough stuff for what you need right now. Parts and products arrive on the factory floor or the store shelf exactly when they're needed, not a moment sooner. The entire system was engineered to be lean and mean. The whole point was to get rid of waste, to squeeze every last drop of efficiency out of the system. It was this global obsession with getting the absolute maximum efficiency for the absolute minimum cost. And hey, for a long time, it totally worked. The data doesn't lie. Take a look at this chart. See that orange line trending down? From 2000 to 2007, manufacturers in the US were consistently holding less and less inventory for the amount they were selling. It was the perfect picture of efficiency. But, and this is a huge but, this beautifully efficient system had a fatal flaw, an Achilles heel. It was built on the assumption that everything would always run perfectly, smoothly, and on time. Any little disruption, any grain of sand in the gears, could bring the whole thing grinding to a halt. It was efficient, yes, but it was also incredibly fragile. And that perfect, fragile system? It was about to get hit hard. A whole series of shocks started to ripple through the world, and every single one exposed another crack in the foundation. The warning shots were fired away before 2020. First, you had the global financial crisis that shook up the whole economy. Then, in 2011, the terrible Tohoku earthquake in Japan showed just how vulnerable all those just-in-time companies really were. But the pandemic, that was something else entirely. It was a global shock that hit every single link in the chain, everywhere in the world, all at the same time. And right here, this is the moment everything changed. Look what happens after that initial dip when the pandemic hits. The blue line, that's inventories. It just keeps climbing and climbing, way faster than sales recovered. That's not a business strategy, folks. That is a panic buy. And just like that, the whole just-in-time philosophy, pretty much out the window. Okay, so this is where our mystery takes a really sharp turn. Because it turns out the problem wasn't just the disruptions themselves. It was what they left behind. This giant cloud of pure, unfiltered volatility. So let's circle back to that mean question we asked a minute ago. We've seen economic shocks before. We've seen disruptions. What on earth made this time so fundamentally different? This, right here. This chart is basically the key to the whole mystery. For almost 2 decades, the level of unpredictability, what economists call variance, in supply chains was pretty low and stable. Then 2020 hits, and look at that spike. It goes completely vertical. The system didn't just break, it became wildly, violently erratic. And you really have to understand what that feels like for a business. It's one thing if a shipment is delayed by a week, and you know it's a week. You can plan for that. It's a completely different problem when you have no idea if it's coming in a week or a month or maybe ever. That is crippling uncertainty. And this new age of uncertainty completely changed the game. It literally changed how business leaders and companies read economic signals. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you hear a loud bang outside your window. If you're in a quiet, safe neighborhood, you probably think, car backfired, and you just move on with your day, right? But what if you hear that exact same sound in the middle of a conflict zone? Your reaction is going to be totally different. The sound is the same, but the context, the uncertainty, changes everything. And that is precisely what started happening with energy prices. Before, in the old, predictable world, a spike in oil meant, okay, my shipping costs are going to go up for a bit. Annoying, but manageable. But in this new, paranoid, high uncertainty world, that very same price spike was a 5-alarm fire. It was seen as a warning that the entire global system might be about to seize up completely. And the research backs this up completely. In normal times, companies looked at actual transportation costs to see what was going on with their supply chains. But in this new, uncertain era, they basically started ignoring those numbers. They were too messy, too unreliable. Instead, everyone's eyes snapped to one thing: energy prices. That became the canary in the coal mine for the whole economy. And here it is. This is the smoking gun. These charts show everything. Look at the dashed line. That's the old, predictable world. An oil shock happens and inflation barely budges. Now look at the solid line. That's our world, the high uncertainty world. The exact same shock sends inflation shooting through the roof, and it stays there. This, right here, is the mechanism that lit the fuse. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. The verdict is in. Let's solve this mystery once and for all, and then try to understand what it means for the new economic world we're all living in. So here's the chain of events, step by step. 1. For decades, we built a global economy that was super efficient, but also super fragile. 2. The pandemic and other shocks shattered our sense of predictability, creating this massive wave of uncertainty. 3. In that new world of fear, businesses started seeing energy prices not just as a cost, but as a dire warning signal. And 4, this is the final domino. They started raising their own prices, not because their costs had already gone up, but because they were terrified of what was about to happen. And when everyone does that at once, you get rampant inflation. And all of this has triggered a fundamental rethink in how the world does business. We're living through this great shift, away from the old way of just-in-time, where efficiency and low costs were king. Now we're in a new era of just-in-case. The goal isn't just to be cheap anymore, it's to be safe, to be resilient. But that resilience, well, it comes at a higher price. And that leaves us with one final, really big and kind of uncomfortable question. As we build this stronger, more resilient global economy, one that can hopefully withstand the next big shock, have we also accidentally built a world where everything is just permanently a little more expensive? What's the true price of playing it safe?